Hello everyone and welcome to my YouTube channel. Today I want to go over the 5 most common card interactions that players mistake or get wrong in a game of Cedh. First of all, I'd like to do an honorable mention with Spellseeker and its Enters the Battlefield trigger. Spellseeker's Enters the Battlefield trigger is a May ability, meaning that you do not actually have to search your library. So let's say somebody casts something like an opposition agent. You don't actually have to search and give them the card. Make sure you DM Callahan from the Mind Sculptors on Twitter about that one. With that, let's get into the actual top 5 card interactions that players get wrong in games of Cedh. With number 5, we have Chain of Vapor or Cyclonic Rift effects, and their interactions with Ashaya Soul of the Wild. Now, Ashaya Soul of the Wild edits the card super types for all of your creatures, making them lands as well. And Chain of Vapor and Cyclonic Rift both specify that they have to bounce non-land permanents. Because Ashaya changes the super types, Chain of Vapor and Cyclonic Rift cannot bounce creatures from a player with an Ashaya Soul of the Wild. Number 4, Finale of Devastation doesn't actually have to search your library. Because of the text on Finale of Devastation, where it specifically says and/or, that means that you can put the spell on the stack with a certain mana value for X. Say your opponents do something like they cast an opposition agent or an Aven Mind Sensor. You can choose not to search your library and instead to choose to resolve the spell as search your library /or graveyard. This means that you will purely search for a card that meets the requirements just from your graveyard. Because of this, you can use Finale of Devastation purely as a reanimation spell instead of a tutor through your library. Number 3, you can still cast spells after a silence resolves. Now, this one's a little weird, but in order to understand this, we're going to take a look at Magic Rule 117 that specifically talks about what happens in various steps and phases. And when you reach your end phase, which is broken into 2 separate steps, being the end step and cleanup step, we'll see that a couple different rules interactions happen. Most notably, once you go to cleanup step, no player gets any priority unless something creates a trigger that would go on the stack that can then be responded to, and more on that in a second. The other thing that happens in the cleanup step is that damage effects wear off, so somebody lightning bolts your 4/4, that damage wears off during the cleanup step. But also, things that specify this turn or until end of turn effects end. Because of that, if somebody casts a silence, or they sacrifice a Ranger Captain of Eos, or something along those lines, on a pivotal turn for you, so long as you have something that can create a trigger in your cleanup step off of discarding cards, then you can still cast spells after the silence or the Ranger Captain of Eos sacrifice has happened. We're going to take a look at some common cards that do create triggers in the cleanup step. The Gitrog monster, and that's one. There's also things like Brawlin. There's also, most notably, things like Necropotence. Necropotence has a trigger to exile the cards from your graveyard after you discard them. Because there's the exile trigger that goes on the stack, if you necro for a hand size that is greater than 7, then when you go to your cleanup step, it will create triggers on the stack that allow you to cast spells again. Number 2, this one's a really big one. And it's the interaction between Underworld Breach and alternate costs. Now for this example, I want you to take a look at the cards Underworld Breach, Deflecting Swat, Fierce Guardianship, and Force of Will. Now let's say somebody has Underworld Breach and you want to remove it. Let's say you have Boseiju Who Endures, or a Nature's Claim is probably better for this example. Your opponent has all 3 of these in their graveyard. They have their commander in play, and they have just like a blue card in hand that they can pitch, the Force of Will. So, you decide, well, there's no reason for you to fight over it because your opponent can just counter it for free. However, that's not actually the case. You see, if we take a closer look at Underworld Breach, you'll notice that it has a couple of specific parameters for what it allows you to do when you're casting the spells from your graveyard. Most notably, it allows you to cast them so long as you exile 3 additional cards from your graveyard, as well as pay the mana cost for the spell. Now, this is what's called an alternate cost for the spell. It gives you another way to cast it that meets different parameters than the original spell. Now, the text on Deflecting Swat, Fierce Guardianship, and Force of Will are all also alternate costs, and you cannot apply multiple alternate costs to a spell. This means that if your opponent is going to cast their Fierce Guardianship, Deflecting Swat, or Force of Will from their graveyard, they have to spend the full mana investment in addition to exiling the 3 cards in order to cast them. And before we move on to our number 1 rules interaction, I just want to remind everybody that if I reach 100 subscribers by the end of this month, before New Year's Day, I'm going to be doing a Q&A session for all things Magic the Gathering, CEDH, and Modern, as well as I'm going to let my subscribers vote on what deck I should play in my next monthly CEDH tournament. So make sure you subscribe if you want to be a part of that. And with that, our number 1 most common interaction that players mistake: Thassa's Oracle doesn't actually require you to leave any cards on top. There have been many times where I've seen somebody go for Thassa's Oracle and Demonic Consultation or Tainted Pact and they get stopped. And then they're forced to resolve the Thassa's Oracle enters the battlefield trigger, they look at the top however many cards, and they go, well, none of these are good, but I have to keep one, so I'm leaving that on top. But if you take a closer look at Thassa's Oracle's text box, it specifically states that you can leave up to 1 of those cards on top, and the rest go on the bottom. Because it's up to 1, you can choose not to leave any. And if you don't leave any, all of them go to the bottom. That is all for this video, everybody. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a good one. I'll see you again soon.